Hey folks, welcome back to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Burrell, and let me say thank you to begin with for joining us today on our live stream. This is going to be a very special event in my mind, and that is because really what we're doing today live is we're going to be taking on one of those interviews that I have called, for lack of better terms, maybe My Story, My Words. And today's guest is one that has been very special to the program for a long time. Not only do I consider him to be a personal friend, somebody who I communicate with often via telephone, via text, encouraging comments and such as that comes below many of these videos, and not only toward me but toward others. But also his journey has really been something else, okay? And he's told us a little bit about that in the past, and I'm talking specifically about Ron Harbour, aka Harbor's Hope on Facebook and YouTube. But I'm talking about Ron Harbour. Ron actually shared a majority of his story with us about a year ago on one of those programs, but today he's kind of bringing us, if you will, up to date. And I say that because Ron has been through a lot of stuff, much of which included, yes, a heart transplant, just like I received, but even more than that, Ron, since that time, has actually had a kidney transplant. Now, when I say it that way, please don't get the idea that that was one thing and then the other. It didn't come that quickly, and it certainly did not come that easy. He had his challenges the whole way through, whether it be the fact that when he started this journey, he weighed 569 pounds. And of course, you can assume there was a weight loss journey there. He had a heart attack. He flatlined in the hospital. His wife, Carla, thankfully was there to support him in that. But when they told him there was nothing they could do, at that point, all he could really do was go after a defibrillator slash pacemaker, ultimately an LVAD, which even that within itself took a toll on him. Finally, as I said earlier, to be transplanted heart transplant wise, and then to begin his wait to get that kidney transplant. So Ron, it is great to have you with us today. And so I just kind of want to start off, and I ran a quick run through right there, but I kind of want to start off today by allowing you to kind of briefly recap the heart transplant side of that journey. What brought you to that? How did that journey really look for you, Ron?
Good morning, Jim. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the honor of doing this, and give all praise to God because I'm a blessed man.
Absolutely.
Back in 10/15 of 2013, I had a heart attack. Had a heart attack because I was fat, and the heart just gave out. As you said, I weighed 569 pounds, and I could do anything that anybody wanted to do, but I just did it very slowly because it took me a while to do it. But I had a heart attack, and they said I had chronic heart failure, so they put me into the hospital to take some fluid off to possibly get me prepared for a quadruple bypass is what they were thinking at that time. And while I was there, my wife came up one Sunday, and we went walking, and the nurse came in and said, Mr. Harbour, you got the leads off. We need to check them. So at that point, she said, come get on the bed. So as soon as I did, and my rear end hit the bed, I flatlined.
Ooh.
And I remember the last thing that I saw at that point was my wife and basically the fear in her eyes.
Wow.
But they brought me around, and they then decided that I had to go to ICU. And I went to ICU, and then they determined that there really wasn't anything that they could do. So, but the doctor there did say, well, there is a program downtown at the medical center that I don't know if we can get you in, but let me make a call. And he made a call, and they said, sure, bring them in. And that was it happened about 9:15 in the evening, around that time. And the problem that I had was because of my weight, there wasn't a gurney that they could have in the hospital that the ambulance could use to transport me.
Right.
So they basically had to tape defibrillators, those paddles that we all love and desire, on my chest and my two areas, and every 30 minutes that they would go off to keep my heart alive.
Oh.
And about 12:45, they found the gurney, and I was taken to Texas Medical Center, taken right into surgery, and external pacemaker and defibrillator was put on. The next morning, we met with the doctors, and I was again thinking I was going to need a quad bypass. And they said, well, we can do one, but it'll fail within 6 months. And they then started explaining a little process called ejection fraction. I knew nothing about this. I'm from a small town in Waco outside of Waco that we had 3,000 people. I'd never even heard the word transplant. And come to find out that the normal person, the ejection fraction is between, and that is what the heart is pumping, the rate that the heart is pumping, how much fluid's going through it, should be about 50 to 75%. Mine was at 8.
Wow.
So they knew that we had a serious problem. Well, at that time, the doctors said, I can remember one of the chief surgeons said, don't worry, Mr. Harbour, I think we can save your life. And basically, that's the last thing that I remember hearing. Thank goodness my wife was there and she heard the rest and always explained to me what they said.
Right.
But they said, what we would like to do is get you qualified for a transplant. You need a transplant. I knew nothing about a transplant, but he said, before then, we need to put an LVAD in, and an LVAD is a left ventricle assisted device, which is basically a heart pump.
Right. And very common for many of us who are facing ultimate transplant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then at that point, he said, the only problem with that is I really didn't qualify for an LVAD because of my weight. So they wanted to do something that had never been done at Herman Memorial. He said, you're going to be the guinea pig, and here's what we would like to do. We would like to do an LVAD and a gastric sleeve procedure at the same time.
Okay.
And I naturally said, yes, do whatever to do to save my life. And at that point, the next day, they started with the insurance company. And as soon as the insurance company heard the word gastric sleeve, they said, no, it's cosmetic surgery. We don't cover cosmetic surgery. So basically for a month, I laid in the hospital with an external defibrillator and pacemaker on while the hospital and insurance company argued back and forth on whether or not they were going to cover me and how they were going to pay for it.
Okay. Pause right there. Pause right there for a minute. They said it was, and maybe this is common, they said it would be a cosmetic surgery, was some of their reasoning behind this, that would simply be a cosmetic type of surgery.
Right.
Oh.
And now it's very common, but back then,
right.
Again, we're talking 9, 10 years ago. Back then, it was not common. Mm-hmm. You know, you literally had to have an insurance policy that would cover that sort of kind of procedures.
Right.
I can remember the chief surgeon came in, and he rarely made rounds, but he just happened to be making rounds that day, and he came in and he said, you haven't been cleared yet? It was like he had forgot about me, obviously. And he said, you haven't been cleared yet? I said, no, sir. He said, oh, this isn't right. And he got on the phone right there in my room, and he called their chief medical officer. And he said, look, if we don't do something, this kid's going to die. And to be truthfully, I'm not even sure that he's going to make it off the table, but we've got to try.
Yes.
At that point, they finally agreed. And so on the 14th of 2013 of November, I was taken into surgery. And my EF, my ejection fraction, had gone down to 4.5%. So I was near death. The day of the surgery, they brought me in. They did the LVAD, put the heart pump in. Then they basically sanitized while I was still in there. They sanitized the operating room, brought the gastric bypass people in, and did the gastric sleeve. I then went back to my room, not knowing any different, woke up, and 2 days later, the gastric doctors came in and explained that they had kind of screwed up because I don't know if you know anything about gastric sleeves or not, but basically you have to go through educational, psychological, financial evaluations, just like with the heart transplant
Right.
and all, to make sure that you can handle the fact that you're going to lose a lot of weight. And he said, we didn't do that with you. We came in due to their request, did the procedure. Now we have to teach you everything. So they did, and there was a few bumps. And like I said, at that time I was 500, excuse me, I'm dry mouth all of a sudden, 569 pounds. So I needed to lose down to about 300, 315 to even start qualifying for the procedure.
Okay. Now, if
So
I'm understanding the gastric bypass, I think a lot of what's fixing to happen is you don't get to eat what you wanted to eat, right?
No, my stomach went from a regular stomach. Think of a stomach being, just as an analogy, think of a stomach being about the size of a small loaf of bread.
Mm-hmm.
My stomach is now, or was then about the size of a large banana. So I could take a child's meal at any restaurant and literally fill up.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, they told me, you're not going to be able to eat sugars. You're not going to be able to drink milk. You're not going to anything greasy. Just and still to this day, sends myself. You pray that it's going to come up one or two ways, through the mouth or through the other way, and you pray that it comes up through the mouth because you don't like the other way.
Just get it out.
But at that point, you had to, back then on the LVAD, you had to change your dressing, the line that went into your stomach that controlled you were on a battery pack that went into your LVAD. That had to be changed daily, and it had to be done sterilely. So they had to train Carla how to do it. And she was always a nervous wreck because she just knew she was going to give me a germ and I was going to die from infection. Well, nowadays, I think they've gone to a week or every 2 weeks they have to change the LVAD dressing. So
yes.
Technology has come along.
Yeah, it has.
I got to go home on the 23rd, and it was great. Went to the heart doctors every week for blood tests to make sure my blood was still thin, and the weight just shed. I can't explain it other than I wasn't eating. The best thing in my life in the world, you could have given me the best prime rib in the world and a cup of chicken noodle soup, Campbell's chicken noodle soup, and I chose chicken noodle soup every time.
So did your taste buds and your appetite change then?
Absolutely.
Well, that's a blessing.
Totally
that's a blessing. Because if you were still craving that other stuff,
it is. Except growing up in Waco, Texas, home of Dr. Pepper, I grew up on Dr. Pepper, and to this day, if I drink a Dr. Pepper, it doesn't taste the same. So it's like, why drink it? Right. It's not worth it.
Well, I'm thankful, kind of similar to that. I'm thankful that right after my heart transplant, and this is a blessing because I was a cheeseburger, chili dog, pizza guy. And right after my heart transplant, just some of the medications you're on and different things, it ruined my taste buds for several months to the extent that none of that tastes good. It tastes terrible. I mean, it tastes absolutely terrible. And so I started eating fruit and nuts, and I ate fruit and nuts for a long time. Something I haven't really ever had an appeal for, but that tasted great versus the cheeseburger and pizza and chili dogs tasted horrible. So that was a blessing. It sounds like you had something similar going on.
Yes, sir. So at that point, fast forward to about the 5th of August, 2014. Not long. just a matter of 10 months, I had lost down to 315 pounds. So I was now ready to at least start the evaluation for a heart transplant. And I have to admit, there were a few bumps along the way, but everything just shed. And on the 15th of August, 2014, I was notified that the committee had approved me to be placed on the transplant list.
Okay.
And at that point, little did I know what was fixing to happen to my life, how it was going to change.
So you're
I
listed.
had grown used to.
I'm sorry, that date, once again, what was that date?
Problem.
August of 20 what?
8/15/2014.
Okay. Just trying to get my timeline.
No problem. I had named my LVAD Baby, and Baby and I went everywhere. We couldn't go swimming. We couldn't take showers normally, but we did everything else together. And I just had grown accustomed to the LVAD. Didn't hear anything, and then all of a sudden at 8:45, I'll never forget it, on 9/30/2014, September the 30th, I received a call from my coordinator, and my coordinator was Ruben at the time, and Ruben had over the process, as you well know, they're not only your coordinators, but you also become friends with them. He would always call and ask how Carla was doing, and he knew I had a dog, and how was my dog doing? We'd chit-chat a little and then get down to business. Well, that morning he called, and all he said was, "I have a heart available. Do you want it?" That's all
of course.
He didn't say, "Hi, Ron," kiss my foot or anything. "I have a heart available. Do you want it?" And I said, "Of course I want it." And he said, "Well, you need to be down here in 5 hours. It's not, let's say 9 o'clock. You need to be down here by 1 o'clock.
Okay, let me pause you right there. Let me pause you right there, because this is one of the things that everybody asks me, and I hear it a lot. Just go through really quickly some of your emotions when you got the call to come down to the hospital. Is it more so fear? Is it excitement? Is it a mix of both? How do you remember that?
I cried.
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny it. I cried. I was scared beyond belief. I was excited, but I was scared because I didn't know the unknown. I had never found people like you or stories like what we're going through. I knew nothing about this. I was going it all by myself. So I can remember that I called Carla. She's a teacher, still teaching. And I called her and called her class, called her cell phone, and said, "You need to get home. They just called from the hospital, and they've got a heart for me." And I can remember just bawling. I mean, that's the expression. I mean, it may not be manly, but it's true. You don't know what's fixing to happen.
Right.
All you know is that you placed your life into people that you really don't know. Possession, and you're trusting that they're going to take care of you and they're going to do what needs to be done.
Right.
I trusted, and I think that's one of the big things is I trusted my team. They hadn't steered me wrong yet. They still have not steered me wrong. Sometimes I don't like what they say.
Right.
And we've grown up like a family. We fight like cats and dogs sometimes when they tell me to do something and I'm not for it.
Yeah.
I'll question them, and they do know one thing about me is I'm not afraid to question them.
Yeah. Well, a few things I want to interject right here.
No problem.
I did a program. It's been 3 or 4 years ago. Probably a little further than that. One of the first programs I ever did was about the emotions of transplant. And before I did that, I took kind of a survey. I think it may have been Facebook. Different people I knew took a survey, and I came up with at least 25 different emotions that flooded in. And a lot of people basically told me that all of them came. It was just one right after the other after the other. It was just crazy. Their mind would not slow down, and that's an obvious thing. Now, for me, you were at home. I was in the hospital when my call came, and I had actually gotten a call, exactly a week before. So from Wednesday to Wednesday, I'd gotten a call already. And because that first call was a false alarm for me, thankfully another man down the hall got that. I was able to shake his hand on the way to surgery. But because it was a false alarm for me, when a second call came in, although I was excited, I actually delayed a little bit from even calling my family because I kept going through my mind, being positive about it, but I was much more relaxed that second time because I thought it ain't really gonna happen. This is not really it. This is just another one of those calls. I'm not gonna get excited. Not gonna get my hopes up, and so I think it kind of I wouldn't say deadened. I can't think of the word, but it kind of brought those emotions down a little bit. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but I had a little different experience. But yeah, I can imagine the tears and every other emotion flowing in.
I can remember that we had already made a list of the key people we wanted to call.
Mm-hmm.
So I started making calls. And Carla got home, and, I already had my bags packed and had to take all my batteries and my charging station and everything for my LVAD back with me at the hospital. But unfortunately, I missed one battery. And to this day, I still have it sitting on my mantle.
Oh yeah.
Just as a reminder, I guess, more than anything. But we got in the car and we're driving, and I remembered that I'd forgot my wallet, which had my insurance card in it. And we were right by a fire station, so I thought, well, I'll just whip in this fire station, turn around, and come back. Well, when I did, the car went in the ditch. The front wheel went into the ditch, and I panicked. I mean, I've got 4 hours to get to the hospital. How can I get a wrecker out here in time? So we ran into the fire station and asked them, could you pull me out with one of the trucks? No, sir, we can't. The liability, I said, to hell with, excuse my French, to hell with the liability. I need to get to the hospital. Can you do it? So they they did it. Didn't really want to, but they did it. And we came back, got my wallet, got to the hospital. Well, everything then went into hurry up and, as you once said, hurry up and wait.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I would get at the hospital at 1, I'd be in surgery by 3, and, hey, that evening I've got a new heart and life's going to be grand again. No, it was wait.
Yeah, and that's one of those.
First of all, they took us. Go ahead.
That's kind of one of those things too. Most of our perceptions of what's going to happen, particularly if they tell you you got 4 hours to get here, and of course they're telling you that because viability of the organ is a 4 hour such as window, depending on the organ, depending on how they can handle that. But you just in your mind, okay, I got 4 hours is countdown. I'll be in surgery within 4 hours. I have to be. We don't realize what's happening on the other end. At least we don't realize initially.
No.
All the delays, what the family on the other side is dealing with, the decisions they're having to make, and so you end up having more time. I don't know if that's a positive or negative. It's more time to mull around in your emotions, I guess. But it is a blessing, and I'm trying to share that because people get in a panic. I've been there, done that. You get in a panic, especially if you're at home trying to get there, and there is urgency, but there's no need for panic at that point.
No, not at all. I can remember they got me in the hospital, checked me in real quick, got me upstairs to the 5th floor, the heart clinic area and ICU area, and they took us into this conference room, and I thought, why am I going into a conference room? Well, that's when you start signing all the consent forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I have bought houses before that I haven't signed my name as much. But they told me a little bit about my heart donor, what they could. It was considered an at-risk heart, which had meant somewhere down the line the heart donor had either been in jail over 24 hours, had narcotic as in his system somewhere. There was something that he had been exposed to that they had to explain that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they asked the immortal question again, do you want the heart? And I looked at Carla, and Carla looked at me, and at the same time, the same exact time, we both said yes. And so they said fine. So they they took me into a room and started their testing. Because again, what a lot of people don't realize, you think all the testing is done.
Mm-hmm.
You're there for your heart. You don't realize that all the testing's not done. They have to take blood samples and match it to that blood samples. They have to go get the heart and everything else that goes along, like you said, in the background.
Yes, and the
Well,
thing.
my surgery.
Well, the thing is in
Go
that
ahead.
the thing is oftentimes not only are the blood type and tissue type and what you just named, a lot of what plays into transplant that we don't always comprehend unless it's an issue going in are the antibodies. And if the antibodies, they could be up or down, and that can happen within a matter of a week.
Right.
So if they saw you in clinic last week, antibodies were fine, you're good for transplant, then you show up at the hospital that day or that night, what have you, and your antibodies are abnormally high, you can be at tremendous risk for immediate rejection. And so they have to be so cautious. That's why there's so much, as you stated, extra blood work, extra things you're going through that you probably weren't expecting. I know the blood draw
No.
the night before what turned out to be my transplant, that blood draw that came in about midnight or something like that, it was like 32 vials and of blood plus culture, 4 cultures, which are cough medicine bottles full of blood. I mean, there was a lot there, and that was just to get me started, it seemed. They drew more as the closer surgery got. So, yeah, it's an ordeal just within itself.
Well, I'm an odd duck, you would say. A lot of people would say, and people that know me, I've got some friends that are probably watching this today because they've never really heard my entire story.
Mm-hmm.
I have an antibody of 0, believe it or not.
Wow, that's
And
good.
even after my transplant, between my transplant of my heart and my kidney, my antibodies have still remained at 0, and they can't understand it. They do not understand why. You know, with all the transfusions, it should be well above that, but it's 0. I did get to 1% one time, and it was like, ooh, what's happening? But back to the story. On the October the 1st, 2014, I had gone into surgery about 10 o'clock the night before on the 30th.
Okay.
And the surgery ended up lasting till about 6 a.m. the morning of the 1st. We had some complications. All my organs decided that during the transplant, they decided they didn't want to play, as I always say, they didn't want to play with the new kid on the block. So they all just shut down. So they had to start bringing each organ, the heart, the liver, the kidney, the lungs, everything up one by one. And so I was on various machines. They induced a coma for 2 weeks, expecting all the organs to come back. And all of them did come back into full strength, except my kidney. My kidney at that point came back in the sense that I was one of these kidney dialysis people that could produce urine. I just didn't filter the blood the way that the heart needed it to be filtered.
Oh, yeah.
So as a result, that's what got me started on dialysis. And I started dialysis basically the very first day after my transplant.
Okay.
So for 7.5 years, 4 times a week, or 3 times a week, 4 hours a day, I went to dialysis and was dialyzed. Not so much to get water and fluid and the urine out of my system, but to filter my system and to make sure that my heart had good blood.
Okay, so take us through a dialysis treatment for you. I know it can be slightly different, but you know a lot about it because you don't go to dialysis alone. You experience it yourself, but you're generally in a room or an area where everybody's there for the same thing, right?
Right. And I mean, I can remember the guy who used to sit to me had not gone to the bathroom and urinated in almost 5 years. because his kidneys had totally shut down. And if he didn't come to dialysis, he would come to dialysis bloated. I just came to dialysis and looked normal. It was like, why are you here? Dialysis is a great thing, but it's not what doctors and the industry want you to believe. It is a means to keep you alive. Your quality of life, it went down. No two ways about it. I have a fistula still in my arm, my left arm. I can't use that arm for blood drawing or blood pressure or anything because of the fistula. Soon it will be hopefully taken out, and then that arm will be productive again. But if you can imagine a roofing nail, a sheetrock nail, or a roofing nail that they put your shingles on, that is the size of the needle that they use to stick me. Because of my size, just being a larger guy, even though I had lost all this weight, being a larger guy and the volume that they needed to pump the blood in and out, I needed the largest needle. It was a size 12 gauge needle.
And you're deep.
That's a big
They're
needle.
deep veins, I guess, too.
And they're very deep veins, and they stick you over and over in the same place over and over. And that's why you can always see a dialysis patient have that big lump on their arm or their wherever they've stuck them so many times. That's just from repeatedly sticking and poking that blood. And you want them to move around. The doctors want them to move around that area, but you don't, because you know that if they do, number one, it's going to hurt worse.
Oh, yeah.
Number two, you know that where they're sticking you is the best place because you're getting the blood.
Now, I do that.
And
very
so,
different, but when I go in to get blood draws, which are nothing like that, but I've got a target. And I mean, there's a dot. I hadn't had blood drawn in a month and a half. There's a dot right there. And so when the techs reach for their needles and I stick that arm out, they're like, start tapping around. I said, no, right there. See that dot? That's my mark. Hit that. And so, yeah.
That's right. And so I had to be at dialysis at 5 a.m. And so I would get up at 3:30, 3:45 that morning and apply a cream and to numb the arm. And then I had a spray that when I got to dialysis, I would spray my arm with this basically lidocaine spray, ether spray, and it would numb the arm farther just so that I could tolerate them putting the needles in. They hated it. Doctors hate it because it does harden the arteries. It hardens the skin over a period of time. But I didn't care. I'm not into needles. I'm not into pain. So therefore, anything I could do to keep the pain away, I was going to do it. When that happened, it would just, I thought that because I had a heart transplant, I was special, I'd go immediately to the top of the list. No, that doesn't happen. You go back to the bottom of the list and you start working your way up. And the way that a dialysis patient works up is, number one, severity. What is the need? Number two is the longevity of dialysis. How long have you been on dialysis? So I wanted the transplant to happen at the same hospital I had my heart because the computers could interlink, doctors could talk to doctors and all. But it didn't work out that way. It worked out to where I ended up having to go to a different hospital down the street. They were actually better known for doing their kidney. Their kidney program is better. I wouldn't go to a different hospital for my heart, but I'm glad I went to the hospital I did for my kidney. So for 7.5 years, that's what I did. Every 3 times a week, every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning.
Okay.
While my wife slept in, I was getting pumped and would come home and You think, oh well, you come home and y'all could go out to eat or go to the beach or do something. No, you came home and you went to bed
Yeah.
because dialysis wipes you out.
Well,
And then
you
at
just
that,
mentioned this a little bit, but I don't know the word to use. This is not the right word. That's my disclaimer. It is not the right word. But the competition is tough here because you've got guys and gals that have been there longer than you have. They've been going through it longer than you have. Yes, what's happening to you then is your blood is not filtering. That is severe. But it's hard to catch somebody's attention when you walk in looking like you do versus, like you mentioned, the other guy over here who's, so swollen, looks like he's going to pop, that kind of thing. And so you're up against some steep, steep competition as far as this goes. And you've got to somehow get everybody on board that this needs to get done, right?
well, what I have found out that a lot of those people that are in that severe dialytic rate situation aren't really candidates for transplant.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And most, believe it or not, most people don't. A lot of people that go to dialysis don't want a transplant. I don't know why, but it's like they've just taken the role in life that that's their fate in life. They're going to go to dialysis. And I wanted out of there as quick as possible. If they could have taken me year one, day two, I'd have been at the hospital and they could open me up, but it didn't happen. I did go to, I had a friend an acquaintance that worked at the different hospital that she kept telling me, Ron, come down to our hospital. I think we can get you in and get you transplanted. And I used to tell her, Amy, no, I'm not ready. I want it to be at the same hospital. I had this mindset that it had to be done that way.
Mm-hmm.
And finally she said, Ron, you shouldn't be on dialysis this long. Something's wrong. So I said, okay, finally I said, fine, I'll meet with your doctors. Let's go. So I ended up going and started the process about June of 2021 during the pandemic and all, but we started the process and they evaluated and said, yeah, we think we can. The first words that the doctor came in, when he came in, my doctor came in, he said, why haven't you been transplanted? And I said, long story. I don't want to get into it, too much politics. Long story. He said, well, okay, we'll get to that later, but, we need to get you transplanted. So they went through the process. And you go through the same kind of process that you went and I went through with our hearts.
Yeah.
You have to be vetted. You have to go through the heart, consultation. And with it being a different hospital, yes, they could use all my records from my first hospital, but they wanted their own records.
Mm-hmm.
So all the blood tests and everything I had to go back through. I had to go back through psychological, through financial, through it all. And on the 23rd of August, it's amazing how certain dates stick in your mind, I was placed on the transplant list at the new hospital. I stayed on dialysis. And I thought, oh, no problem. Now I'm on the transplant list. I remember how quick it was to get my heart after being on the transplant list at them. So, yeah, let's see. It's August. Yeah, by October I should have my transplant.
Mm.
Well, unfortunately, you go through. That's when I learned the ugly experience of what a dry run is. As you said, with your heart, you had a dry run with your heart. I had 4 with my transplant, with my heart, and with my kidneys. And you're right, because you get built up that it's your time, and then you get to the hospital and you go through all the tests. They pull the blood, and you're sitting there waiting, and you're excited. You're talking to your wife, and they come in and they say, "No, it's not. We gave this to so and so. You were number 2 on the list, so and so." It's a very regimented process,
Right.
and it's something that that they don't really explain to you. You just have to live through it. Like I said, kept on dialysis. And then on the 3rd of February, 2022, I got a call that said, Ron, we think we have a match. And every time that I'd gone in on a dry run and didn't get the kidney, the doctor and the coordinators would always come and tell me, don't worry, Ron, it's going to happen. We just want to get that perfect match for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so sick of hearing that perfect match. It was like, I don't care how perfect. Let's just get a match. You know, I'll worry with the perfection later and work around it, but let's just get a match.
Yeah.
Well, he came in and said, I really do think that this is a good match. So on the 4th, I went in that morning. With a kidney, you don't have the time restraints that you have with a heart and other organs. You have a little bit of time that they can work with it. So I thought they were going to bring me right in on the 3rd and let's get it done. No, I'll be here at 7:15 on the 4th, and we'll get you admitted and get it started. So I went in and they did blood tests, and they came in, and I had just had dialysis the day before on the 3rd. And they came in and they said, well, the doctor really wants you to have dialysis one more time. And I looked at them and said, you've got to be kidding me. They said, no, you need to have dialysis. And I said, no. They said, well, you're not getting a kidney unless you have dialysis one more time. I said, fine, yes, let's go to dialysis. So they wheeled me down to the dialysis clinic there at the hospital and hooked me up. And about an hour, 15 minutes into my dialysis, the phone rang, and the dialysis nurse went over and said, well, yes, he's on dialysis. He's still got 2.5 hours left. They said, well, we really need him in the operating room. And I said, okay. And so at that point, he came over and started getting me off of the machine. And I said, I'm not going to the operating room till I see my wife. Because we always had this thing that we never said goodbye. We just said, we'll see you when you get out. Love you.
Yeah.
And so she met me in the hallway on the way to the operating room. We kissed and said our little bits to each other, and I wheeled into the operating room. I'm fully awake. Hadn't had any kind of sedatives, nothing. And I'm laying there in the hospital, ready. They're ready, and they're all busy scurrying around. And I see this man in a white coat or a surgical gown with surgical gloves working on this thing in this basin. And he's raising it up and cutting on it, raising it up. And I looked over and said, Doc, what is that you're doing? He goes, I'm working on your kidney. I got to get it prepared for you. I said, you're what? He said, yeah. And so he literally took the forceps and lifted up my kidney out of the solution and said, yeah, here it is. He'll be ready in a few minutes, and put it back down and went back to work.
Okay.
And
So
said,
look,
okay.
pause right there. I don't know, and I would love to hear if anybody else has been through the kidney transplant procedure has had that experience, but I'm going to say that may be a one of a kind, or at least a few of a kind experience, to be brought in the operating room and see what will be your kidney in a number of hours right there in front of you.
It was a total mind blowing. And so then they put me under, and I remember they were hoping that they had warned me, they keep warning you. It could be a sleepy kidney. You may have to go back through dialysis to get it to wake up. Well, fortunately for me, they connected the vessels, and then when they connected the main urethra, it started producing immediately. And so they were thrilled. I went back to the room, and by the grace of God and a great medical staff, 48 hours after I was sewn up with the kidney, I was being wheeled out of the hospital to go home.
There we go.
And I was blessed beyond belief. Today, stepped on the scale this morning because I knew somebody would probably ask, probably you, how much you weigh today? Today, I weigh 226 pounds.
Well, that's
I
healthy
have,
because you got way too low earlier, right? And then you didn't share that here,
oh
but you
yeah,
got down to what,
I'd gotten down to
106?
172 pounds, and
Yeah.
for my body size, that was way too low.
Mm-hmm.
So I've lost a little over, in 10 years, I've lost a little over 376, 74 pounds. And still to this day, my gastric doctor is still amazed that I kept it off. And he said normally people will lose 100 or 150 and then put it right back on. And no, I've kept it off. I'm honored and proud to say that in 8 years, I knock on wood, and by the grace of God, I've never had a rejection of my heart. All my labs look great at my kidney. The creatinine level, which is one of the main factors that they look at, should be between 0.5 and 1.2.
Mm-hmm.
And last week it was 0.86.
Yeah.
So, it had gone up actually 2 ticks or 2 100s. And so at the visit, I was concerned. The doctor looked at me and said, "Are you crazy? This is great." He said, "Keep this up and everything will be fine." It's the only thing they watch now is the blood pressure. My blood pressure will spike every once in a while, but it's because they've got me on a short-acting blood pressure medicine, not a long-acting. Because when you go into kidney failure after a heart transplant, it's really hard for the heart people because they can't give you the regimen of drugs that they would like to or would give to a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
They have to scale everything back because it's going through the kidney. The kidney's already damaged. They don't want to totally kill the kidneys, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So where somebody may take X amount of prednisone, I was on a very low dosage and still on a very low dosage of prednisone. And then we have the complication of I'm dealing with 2 hospitals, 2 different transplant teams, 2 different computer systems. They don't talk to each other. So at first I was fighting you can't do that. That's my area. That's my kingdom. And so finally, I literally got them both, got one on the phone and was sitting in the office at the other one of the 2 doctors. And I said, "Look, we're in this for the long haul, guys.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to work together. This this can't happen." And I'm fortunate that they do work together now. They share information. The heart transplant people deal with my heart and my tacrolimus level. They let the kidney transplant people do all the other items for my body. And then I have the third group, which is the gastric group. They still keeping tabs with me for micronutrients to make sure that I'm not going to gain back all my weight. But it's kind of like one of those things. Once I've heard, I've never smoked, but I've heard this from smokers. Once they've been a smoker and they quit smoking, they can't really stand and tolerate being around another smoker. It bothers them. Well, that's the same thing that is with me. I'm never rude to anybody with their weight problem because Lord knows I was there, been there, done that. And like you said, have the T-shirt to show for it.
Yeah.
But I always look at Carla and close my eyes and say, by the grace of God, there go I.
Yeah.
And so I understand, that weight is a problem. We have a lot more problems than just heart transplants or kidneys or are, it's the whole package.
Yeah.
But I've been very fortunate. We set the ground rules, and it seems to be going well. They all monitor, they talk to each other. Uh, I've just gone through my 8th-year evaluation. It should have been back in October, but I've also learned that the farther you get out and the more stable you are, you're not as critical to the team as you once were. That first year, 2 and 3 are your very, very most critical, especially year 1. That's when they're changing all the meds. Year 2, they're getting you settled in. Year 3, they're kind of preparing to set you loose to life, because you're wondering, when am I going to start getting to live out my life the way I want to live?
Yeah.
Well, you just have to hold back. You have to understand that it really is a process. You have to trust your doctors. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but you have to trust them, and you have to understand that when they give you the information, you have to understand it. And if you don't understand it, ask another question.
Yeah.
I am the type that I'm not like some transplant patients. I am the type that I don't call my doctor or my transplant coordinator every time I stub my toe or something happens. She knows that when I call and she hears my voice or sees that I left a call, she calls back, and immediately the first thing that Crystal will say is everything right? All right, Ron? Because that's the way I want it, because she has a lot of other patients. Some of them are brand new. Some of them are not doing well. They need to concentrate on them. I'm, by the grace of God, stable, and I'm living a very good life and able to do what I want to do when I need to do. So as a result, I try to keep an arm's distance as far as bothering them.
Yeah.
But we also have the understanding that if a call is placed by them, then they know that it's something that I consider serious.
Right. And let me interject about that. And I got a couple questions in a minute too, but
Okay.
As you well know, you don't want to become the little boy who cried wolf. At the same time, we have to be aware that, and you are, but newbies, I think is the term that's used nowadays. Not when I was growing up, but that's what they might say now. And I may be 10 years late with that. But people who are new to this, your team is there to support you if they're doing their jobs correctly and really good. They're there to support you, and they are there for the stubbing of the toe if that's what needs to be happening, especially early on in the beginning. Not that to be literally, but there's so much that if we're not careful, we'll overlook. 9.5, 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, if I would have ran a fever that was 105, 100.5, I wouldn't have told anybody about that. I mean, I wouldn't go to the doctor. I wouldn't have done anything. I wouldn't have taken Tylenol, nothing. Nowadays, that's an issue. And so the little things do count now. They really do count. But at the same time, you have to balance, which you're doing a good job of it, apparently. But you have to balance between, and if your team gets the impression that you're going to call them 4 times a week, don't be surprised. And you can call this right or wrong, but don't be surprised if they don't return those calls 4 times a week. If they don't get around to you by the end of the day, because they can easily get accustomed to, well, that's so-and-so, I wonder what he did today. Does his ear hurt, or whatever. And so, yeah, you got to balance that. And so I just want to emphasize that you do a great job of that, it sounds like.
I have an example. When I first got my kidney, I got a urinary tract infection, which is not uncommon. And I couldn't get a hold of the kidney people. They're extremely busy. They don't have a lot of coordinators and such and such. So what I ended up doing was calling my heart transplant coordinator. And she said, "You got what?" And I told her, and she said, "You running a fever?" I said, "Yeah, a little bit," and gave her the symptoms. She said, "You get to the ER right now." And I said, "Okay, you want me to go out here or do you want me to come downtown?" She said, "No, you come downtown."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "I'll notify the kidney people what we're doing." And so she did. And lo and behold, what happened was I had an infection in my bloodstream that, as you well know, the heart people take that extremely critical.
Oh, yeah.
I had an infection in my bloodstream that they would get rid of the urinary tract infection, but a week later it'd come back. And they could not understand why. And the kidney was working fine, but I still was getting this. And what it was a bacteria that I had in my blood that they had to get infectious disease people to come and run, as you said, the Coke.
Mm-hmm. Ron, I may have lost you. Always some technical difficulties. I may have lost Ron. Just excuse me for just a second. We'll try to get Ron back. I don't know what I've done.
Hello?
I don't know what
Oh,
happened then.
yeah, don't know. But anyway, I'll go back. They said normally that it used to be we took antibiotics, penicillin and amoxicillin in the rear end,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was fine. But now they narrow it down to the very strain of the infection and everything, and they give you the antibiotics for that infection, and it kills it. And once they did that, I've been fine, never had a urinary tract and another one since. I do have to drink a lot of water. I drink more water now. I feel like a fish.
Yeah.
I drink between 128 and 150 liters of water a day, or milliliters, or liters, I guess.
Yeah, milliliters, I guess.
Ounces a day. Ounces a day. I've got it in ounces. And that's a lot of water.
Yeah.
But as long as I do that, it keeps everything flowing and keeps everything going. Recently, to cap everything off, is I went to the eye doctor because I couldn't see out of one eye. It was kind of blurry, and they said, "You got a severe cataract in that eye, and you got another one growing in the other eye." And so I'm thinking, "Oh, gee, more operations." Well, on the 28th of November of this year, I had my right eye done, and the 5th of this month, I had my left eye done, and I am amazed how well I see now. I don't have glasses anymore. I don't have contacts anymore, and it's like, why didn't I have this done years ago? So you can have other things. I know I was on one of the YouTube channels the other day that are one of the groups that the guy said, "I'm fixing to have a deep cleaning of my teeth. Can I do that? I'm a heart transplant of 2 years." And I told him, "Yes, you could." I don't offer medical advice, but I will tell them I will offer support. And I said, check with your transplant team, but I'm sure that they will allow that. And basically they will. Yeah. They're just going to put you on medication and monitor it. And it's amazing. Everything I have to have done anymore, I can't go to a regular hospital out here in the suburbs. We live outside of Houston, a little bit north of Houston. I can't go to the Woodlands to any of their hospital. I have to go back downtown to my hospital and have because they want me there in case something goes wrong.
Oh, yeah. And
so just like my eye cataract, normally they do that outpatient in the clinic. They couldn't. They had to take me into the operation, and I had to have outpatient operation in the hospital so that in case something went wrong, then I was there for the team to do what they needed to do. But it's been a life. It's been a journey. You have to have a support team. I am so grateful for my wife. The picture that you see, she is my soulmate, my life of all. She has been with me thick and thin. The only thing in this entire process that I ever regretted, and there's only been one thing I've ever regretted, was that I flatlined in front of her, because I can still close my eyes and see the sheer panic in her face.
Yeah.
When that happened, because she didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on, obviously. But it's been a journey, and I thank you for programs like this, that we're able to share our journeys, and that you give the information that you give out. You do not, I don't think you totally understand or fathom the importance of the information, because the doctors are there to save our lives. They're not there to spoon feed us and tell us all the ins and outs of what's happening. It takes people like us that have been through the process, that why I created Harbor's Hope. We do much the same thing that you do, just more on a local level at this point, to explain to the process that it's going to be okay. It's okay. Look at me. I'm living, I'm walking, I'm breathing. 10 years ago, I should have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
How many years for you? 9 years ago,
Yep.
9+ years ago, at any point in time, you should have been buried 6 foot under. And you're not. And as long as people understand that and can see the hope, and that there is a future. I'm just now, the hardest thing, if you were to ask me what the hardest thing is about this whole process, is I'm a planner. I like to plan what's going to happen 2 weeks from now, what's going to happen 6 months from now, where are we going to be? And I've always found that hard, because, face it, I'm living on borrowed time, and I appreciate the borrowed time. And so I've just recently gotten to where, due to the medical checkups that I've been and what the doctors have told me, that I'm able to look farther out, like a year from now, 2 years from now. What are we going to do in a couple years? My wife is 73 years old, still teaches high school French. She came home the other day and told me that she had a year and a half more and she was going to retire again. She's already retired once.
Yeah.
But went back. And she said, I'm going to retire again, and this time it's going to be the final time. So I'm able now to look out and say, okay, when you retire, we can do this, this, and this. And I used not to have that ability.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask people for help more than anything. I think a lot of that, we don't ask people for help, and that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and you understand this. We've talked about this personally several different times before, but I'm hoping, and you are, we're hoping to help, like all the transplant helpers do, to fill that gap between what the doctors are able to do and willing to do, because they've not been there and they're not doing that. That's always my quote. I've been there. I'm doing, ing is the key. I'm doing that. You're doing that. They've not been there and done that. And just like that doctor, it came to mind when you said it earlier, way earlier. You said, the doctor said, hey, I want you to go down and have one more dialysis. Man, if you had been on dialysis for 7 years, 3 times a week like me, you would not have one more dialysis. Now, I get there was probably some safety issues, but looking at it from the physical, look at how this really feels. Look at what I'm experiencing side. He wouldn't want one more dialysis, but, we have to try to bridge that gap between what the doctors are able to do, willing to do, and then the experiences of everybody else. We all have different experiences. We all have different approaches. We all have different mindsets and attitudes. but somehow all that has to mesh. We have to have the education that the doctors could share with us potentially versus the experience that we actually have. That's what matters so much, is the actual experience that we really do have. And so, it's a beautiful thing when you can work and try to get those things together. So, Ron, let me just say from that perspective, initially, thank you, thank you, thank you for what you have done, what you are doing to try to assist, to be a mentor, to be, a supplier of goods and needs. I know you supply quite a bit financially and physically sometimes through the work that
Yes,
you do. You
we
you
do.
give it back. You give back, and thank you for that, because there's a tremendous need out here for so much of this stuff.
Absolutely. Well, you have to give it back, Jim, because we were given gifts that we didn't ask for, we didn't request. There was people in our lives, and unfortunately, I never got to meet my donor's family from my heart. I hope to be meeting my donor's family for my kidney very soon, but it's gave us the ultimate sacrifice. They gave us the ultimate gift, and I still go through a psychiatrist. Once you're that first year that you're under a transplant program, at least with the kidneys, they want you to talk to a psychiatrist bi-monthly or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
every couple months. And she tells me, Ron, just remember this: you're living for 3 people. You're not living just for yourself. Whatever decision you make, you're making for 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time she asked me, I kind of said, okay, explain. I'm an Aggie. You got to explain these things to us guys. And she said, you're living for you, you're living for your heart donor, and you're living for your kidney donor.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you do affects that. And it put it into perspective that you're right. I'm just not doing this, not only for me and my family, but I'm doing it for the people who gave the ultimate gifts.
Right. Well, Ron, I really, really, really appreciate you sharing this with us today, particularly this chapter 2, this kidneys part of this chapter, this part of the journey. It's been good to for me to rehear some of what, you had rehearsed before and told us about with your heart transplant, but now to really get some more perspective on the kidney side of things. I remember that day
Can I?
vividly
Can
that,
I?
that you got the call, because I got a phone call and I thought, man, this is Ron. I mean, I have your number in my phone. I said, this is Ron, but I'm kind of
Right.
tied up that day. I was actually about to, I can't remember if I was about to go in a pulpit to preach or come out, but it was an inconvenient time. But I thought, I'm going to answer it anyway. It's Ron. I'll just tell him that I have to call him later. And when I answered that phone and you said, I'm getting a kidney, oh man, it was great. Great to hear that, because I knew the struggles,
Right.
knew something at least about the struggle you'd been through. So I was thrilled for that. But it's good to hear that this in more detail to get to
Can we
understand.
both make a pact today? Can we both make a pact today between each other?
I'll agree to
Can
whatever.
we let our journeys? Can we let our journeys just kind of glide for a while and not take any more of these big steps? Keep your liver in keep your liver intact. Keep everything intact, because I'm tired. I'm tired of going through these journeys. But I gratefully do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining. I'm more joking than anything.
Oh, yeah.
But it's kind of like, Uncle, you've been cut up on so much. I take my shirt off to hop in the shower, and I look at all the scars and I say, man, those battle scars. Whew. But they all tell a story, and I don't regret that story at all.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ron, again, I do appreciate you. We've got a handful of comments, not very many today. It's Friday, middle of the day, and most folks, unlike us, are involved in other things. But just to back
Right.
up, just to tell everybody hello, that sort of thing. Of course, Ron, you commented before we even began the broadcast, so hello to you. Good morning to you. Of course, heard from the spam, that sort of stuff. Just disregard that. Those people have been
Yeah.
banned. They'll come up with a different email, but Tracy, which is a good hometown friend of mine, says hello and thanks you for sharing your story. So hello to you, Tracy. And also Michelle Nichols. She says a few different things to us, but I do want to point out one thing that she says, which I've got it up here on the screen. I'll try to get it in a bigger way. But Michelle says, thank you for sharing your story. It's been 11 years this month for her. So congratulations for sure to
She's
you,
my hero.
Michelle.
She's my hero.
Yeah, absolutely. Just
I
keep.
look at all these people that blaze this trail beyond us, and I think, man, I'm going to get there someday. It's not getting there quick enough, but I'll get there.
Well, I tell people all the time in that condition, of course, if she's 11 years, she's a little further than me. And then I'll chase her.
Right.
You can chase me or I'll chase you. But either way, we both keep running. So that's hopefully what she's doing. Of course, as always, we have Jason Merlenbach with us. He says, good day, everyone. May we all be blessed. Greatest luck to you, Ron. And God bless you all. Jason is
I
always
appreciate it. Thank you.
tremendous encouragement. So
Yes.
thank you for that, Jason. But we're going to go ahead and get off of this. I apologize.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. It's been an honor, and that's all I can say. I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you. But I apologize. I know on the other end, the stream has been a little spotty. That's the way it is. I live in a town. Ron said he lives in a town of 3,000. I live in a town of 1,800. So we get what we get as far as internet out here. So I know it's been a little bit slow. But what I will do later is I'll go back and edit this down just a little bit, and I'll post it as a regular video. So if you had to bail out because the internet wasn't keeping up or whatever, eventually we'll put this up as a official My Story, My Words. And so we'll make that available a little bit later, probably be a day or two or so before we get caught up with that. But thank you once again for being with me today, Ron, and to each of you. Thank you to all of you. And until next time, say it together with me, Ron. Stay stronger, friends. A little bit of delay between he and us, but that's good enough. Thank you so much.